From May 2020 to May 2023, pet food prices rose by 24% on average, and they never really came down since. Take this alongside the rising cost of veterinary care and economic uncertainty in general, and it's no wonder there are people shifting to cheaper pet products. Not because they don't love their pets, but because they have to make ends meet.
And let's face it, the humanization of pets means caring for them is not only increasingly expensive, it's increasingly emotional. They don't just call us pet parents for nothing. Speaking of, you know how they say having a kid these days is like 20 or 30 grand per year investment? Ouch. And that's just getting them to 18 years old. Let's not even talk about college. Well, it can cost up to $34,000 to own and care for a giant schnauzer over the course of its entire life, which is certainly cheaper than kids, but ooh, it's still a good chunk of change.
Now imagine spending that much, tens of thousands of dollars, on a single item for your pet. Yep, that's what we're getting into today.
Our pets are no longer just pets. They're treasured members of our family. But is humanization of pets actually a good thing? Is the amount spent on your pet equal to the amount of love you have for them? And what happens when basic pet supplies like food become so expensive that the average American can't afford them?
So get your popcorn ready because we're going meta to explore what it means to be human, what it means to be pet, and why value is really in the eyes and in the economic bubbles of the beholder.
Welcome to Barking Mad, a podcast by BSM Partners. We're your hosts, Dr. Stephanie Clark.
And I'm Jordan Tyler. So the humanization of pets, a lot of people call this a trend. I would argue it's not really a trend anymore. It's just kind of the way that the pet industry operates. It's transformed everything from the way we feed our pets, the way we play with them and engage them, and the way that we just care for them in general. But at some point, things start to seem like they're getting a little out of hand, right? Like, did you know there are dog collars that are worth as much as, like a small McMansion? There are pet products offered by Gucci, by Tiffany, by Ralph Lauren that range in price from hundreds of dollars, which might seem modest after some of the things that we're going to talk about today, to thousands of dollars, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So let's start off with, it's a brand called Posh Puppy Boutique. They sell a diamond dog collar for, actually, Michael, how much do you think a diamond dog collar could possibly cost? Don't look at your notes.
Let's say it's $50,000.
You were close. Multiply that by 5.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's just where your where your affinities lie. Do you need a home or do you need a well-dressed dog?
I would have an issue hooking a $5 leash to that collar and saying, come on, Barley, let's go for a walk.
Right.
Ostensibly, if you're buying that collar, though, you're not accessorizing it with a $5 leash.
Well, I mean, where are you taking this dog?
That's actually a really good question.
Yeah.
Well, again, with something of that value around the dog's neck, where would you feel comfortable taking the dog?
I mean, in St. Louis, dogs get kidnapped. Could you imagine if you had that around its neck?
Dog's a goner.
Self-proclaimed on the website as, I quote, the crown jewel of the canine kingdom. Custom crafted and fitted to each dog. Requires a 50% deposit, so that is $125,000 just to start the customization process. So, because they can be customized, sky's the limit, right? These could cost way more than $250,000. That's just where they base it from. And I wanted to share, there's 2 reviews on this website, both of which I thought were hilarious. So the first review is titled, "Not bad for the price."
Fantastic.
The second one,
I guess if you're in that market and you're slumming, that's not bad. I don't usually buy a discount dog collar, but that one wasn't bad for the price.
not bad for the price. And then the second comment reads in full, "I've tried everything from prong collars to harnesses, but my Cavapoo will not wear anything that does not cost less than $250,000.
I hope one day someone talks to me like that.
And it's just like a fact.
I've tried grandma sweaters, but nothing will do.
It's just that nothing will do.
You know those weird Prince and the Pauper kind of movies where, this would be like a good thing for that dog to switch with like a humble dog just for a bit.
Oh, it's like that one show where, like, you have the 2 families that are, like, diametrically opposed and they trade moms.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Could you imagine this dog that wears this being part of, like, Homeward Bound? He for sure ain't making it.
Yeah, he can't be bothered by that. Yeah.
He's hawking that collar and a pawn stop for bus fare. That's what's gonna happen.
I'm hawking that collar and the dog for bus fare.
I'm hugging it for a house, okay? Let's be honest.
I mean, in this economy? Come on.
So let me ask you two something along those lines then. So when you see somebody, buying one of these luxury products with those kind of price tags, what's your reaction? Are you jealous? Do you admire them? Are you judgy? Are you confused? What's the reaction?
I think I'm judgy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm probably judgy and also confused because I feel like if I had that kind of money, I also want a farm with chickens. So I'm pretty sure people would look at me and be like, you want a farm and chickens and goats? And
Why judgy?
I kind of wonder, now that you ask, Michael, I wonder if my judginess stems from jealousy.
I think it's a humanitarian approach to it. Like, if you have that kind of money, like, should you be doing something else? Like,
Well, you're making the call that they're not, though.
true.
I mean, they might be donating every penny they have, and that's still left over.
That is true. And then I'm just totally and utterly confused because my mind cannot comprehend those kind of numbers.
So let's talk about that, because I think that's when we shift into the humanization piece. I think what you just said there is really, really interesting in the sense, what do you buy right now that somebody else would see as illogical and extravagant?
I'm gonna be real honest. We're gonna just open up this book. I bought a red light therapy mask.
You did?
I haven't tried it yet, so don't. Careful with what you say next.
I think that's a really interesting example. I know there are all sorts of scales and quality on these, but some of these, I'm not going to ask you what you paid for these. Some of these are thousands of dollars.
I'm hopefully getting it soon. I ordered it a couple weeks ago, so I don't know. Maybe they're making it.
So your next podcast has to be recorded with Steph in her mask. All right, you have to do it at least for a minute.
That's fine. I'm so stoked. If I use it and it literally works, I'll tout it from the rooftop.
If you pop out flat out radiant, I'm buying one. So
Are you saying I'm not radiant right now?
no, you're radiant, but you know what I mean. Why did you buy it? You're saying you're not
No,
radiant.
because children do a number on you. Lack of sleep, stress.
All right, but the general gist behind why did you buy it? What do you want it to
I
do
want
for
to
you?
look radiant.
Exactly. So I didn't say that, you did. And more to the point, like I say, some people would pay thousands of dollars for those. Some of them also were supposed to grow hair.
I don't want hair on my face.
Well, I hope that doesn't happen on your face. Yeah.
I want the radiant part, not the hairy part. But your turn, Jordan. Same question.
Well, I can't think of anything that is that, like, $70,000, $250,000 expensive. I don't even know what $250,000 looks like, to be honest. But I will say we have a very expensive, it's not like very, very expensive. It was a few $100, like investment up front. And then like the litter is a little bit more expensive because of the way it is. But we have a robot litter box. And the way I've justified it is it makes our lives so much easier that it was like 100% worth that money. But it was an investment. And it's like, I know that's not something that every pet owner or cat owner can afford, but it does make life a lot easier.
You're not talking any kind of pure vanity, though.
I think that's what I'm struggling with some of the luxury brands that we've talked about and that we researched for this episode is like, I get shelling out, a good chunk of change for something that like Stephanie makes you feel like more confident or more beautiful or like more like healthful. Or something that like makes my life easier or is like more hygienic for me and my pets. And I kind of start to lose the plot when we talk about, the $250,000 dog collar that is like strictly for aesthetic purposes.
But the value of that is in the eye of the beholder, right? So I'm guessing, as a musical family, I'm guessing you've shelled out a fair amount of money on music and musical instruments and things like that other people would say, really?
That's an excellent point, Michael. Yeah. Like, I was shocked to learn how much a cello bow costs.
And I don't even know what that is. I'm assuming it goes to the cello. But the point is, we all have our things. We all have things that would make somebody else go, that's one way to live your life.
I mean, clearly they're still in business, right? Like, they didn't just sell one dog collar and then they went out of business.
Well, you could, though. You could just sell one dog collar and call it a day.
You could.
Well, Michael, I appreciate your point. And by the way, I totally agree. But I mean, all that's to say, no dog really needs a $250,000 collar, right? We're talking need here. And the answer is no. So if it's not about what the pet needs, what's really driving all of this? Like, what's pushing people to spend this much on our pets? And how do you think the humanization of pets is shaping today's pet care ecosystem?
You know how I feel about humanization, right? Humanization is just, it is absolutely real and it's the dumbest term, you know, possibly imaginable. But if we use it on the, let's say the base definition of that is, if it's in the human world and we like it in the human world, we want it for our pets. Let's just use that as a very, very, simple definition of the word. It's human nature. It just makes sense, right? I understand this. I get it. I can find it. It works for me. It'd be great if there was one for Fluffy. And so I think it goes beyond humanization here, though, because you mentioned yourself, you splurged for a litter genie. What did whatever the automated? What I don't want to throw out a brand. You splurged for whatever that was,
Yeah. I can't even remember what the brand is actually. So, yeah.
and to you that was important, right? I'm not saying it's not important. The point is it was important to you. To a lot of people, that would either be not affordable or, and this is the part that I think is key here about the argument I want to make. To a lot of people, that is such an extravagance, it's unimaginable.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I want to throw out the example. You mentioned, the 250,000 or the $250,000, dog collar. The person that commented that their dog wouldn't be seen in anything less than that value. Okay, who is that person? We know what her value judgment is here. We don't know what her moral judgment is. I think what we're seeing with a lot of this stuff, and I think it's honestly better than the term humanization, is really, pet lifestyle branding, if you will. My pet is really going to echo my life, my style, my values, my wherewithal, not necessarily because I think it's any better or any worse for the pet, but just because that's the life I know. And so let's go back to this woman. I'm gonna introduce the term of basically economic bubbles, right? We all live in an economic bubble. And this lady clearly lives in an economic bubble. And I think when we're talking about the pet industry, I think we all tend to, I mean, raise your hand if you think I'm wrong. We all tend to think we're the average consumer in pet, right? This is what people buy. They buy what I buy. They buy how I buy, or they probably should by how I buy. I'm educated enough about it. My earnings are blah, 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 blah. And that's about, commensurate with what I'm buying. People buy like me. People think about pet like me. Just to throw out some stats, there are 17 to 19 million people, or million households, I guess, in this country that make 200,000 plus a year. That's a staggering amount of households and a really good income. To take that a step further, there are nearly 130,000 households in this country that make 1 million or more per year. just to put some perspective around that, there are people who take a, who will charter a cruise, for lack of a better word, take a chartered cruise for 1 week, and some of these things start at a minimum of 100,000 a week. And that is not a lot of money. That's what I choose to do for my vacation. You and I, and hopefully Steph, we cannot fathom that economic bubble, right? What does that look like, right? What what high country are you living in, when you're dropping $100,000 on a 1-week vacation, right? That's a lot of money. I wanna give you another example, and think of it like this. There are celebrities, and there are actually ones that fall into this, and so I'm not gonna name any, but there are celebrities who have car collections that are valued at $100 million. But let's assume that this celebrity, net worth half a billion, right? So 20%, and again, there are actual celebrities that fit both of these descriptors, so I'm not making this up. There are people that fall into this bucket. If my net worth is $500 million and 100 million of that is tied up in cars, 20% of my income is tied up in this car collection. The average American, we're going to look at the median net worth of Americans, not the mean. It's just over $200,000. And so if 20% of my net worth is tied up in a vehicle, that's $40,000, and that's less than the average price of a new car right now. And so we look at some of these dollar amounts and we're just flummoxed by them, but for them, it's just everyday spending. Like we're buying your, average mid-tier automobile, they're filling that garage with cars because what else do I have to spend it on? And so the sheer breadth of these economic bubbles, I think, is what blows our minds when we look at some of these, what we would deem very, very extravagant pet products, because wow, what would you do with that? To them, what else would I buy? I mean, I've never seen one that costs $10. I didn't know you could do that because everything I get, all the people I surround myself with, all the social media I view, if I'm not spending $50,000 on that, there's something wrong with me. I'm a cheapskate. And economically, again, $50,000 sounds like a lot of money. To a lot of people, it's just not.
Yeah.
This is logical spending for my pet. You use the word humanization. We think our pets are our family. We think our pets are our children. We did a study that shows that 50% of American pet owners actually think their dog is a person, is a human. It goes beyond it's a member of the family, it's a human. So if it's $32,000 a lifetime to raise a giant schnauzer, you've seen things from the Bureau of Labor, saying it's $20,000 a year to raise a child, you know, through age 18. Is that really a lot of money? And again, if I have a whole lot of wherewithal and this giant schnauzer is my child, $32,000 lifetime, that's nothing, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again, that's pocket change. I'm just blowing that. And so I it's it 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 took me a while to reconcile with it because again, it is ridiculous amounts of money. It's just, when there are people out there that can buy a Lamborghini, as easily as you would buy a Snickers bar because it's the same percentage of income, is $250,000 that extravagant? Would you buy a Snickers bar for your dog? I mean, you wouldn't, but you know what I mean. Would you shell out $3, you know, um, adjusted income for your dog? Of course you would. It's just the scope of what some of these people are making is really what's mind-blowing. As a country, you guys have heard the term Gini coefficient, right? It's a measurement of a country's income inequality. We have a very high, ratio of income inequality in the United States, and so, we have people that would look at your lifestyles and say, "That's unbelievable." You can eat out anytime you want. You can probably buy something. I don't know what, but you can buy something or something for your pet anytime you want. There are people that would find that just unbelievable. And so, we have a hard time extrapolating that beyond our bubble is how could somebody drop something worth more than my house on their dog? But if I'm worth $500 million, I probably buy lunches more than your house. I didn't mean to put this kind of sobering on the call. It's just
Seriously. No. I think that that perspective is important because I do think that, like, we can get, like,
Still want to be judgy.
but it really does, like, it does just depend on, like, what lens you're seeing the world through. And to, like, say it how Michael said it, which economic bubble are you in? I think kind of what I'm interested in talking a little bit about is it seems like the humanization of pets, the premiumization of pet care, like those two things have gone hand in hand. But it seems like we're premiumizing and we're humanizing the entire market, and we're really starting to like demonize, options for pet owners that are more affordable for like the general population of pet owners. And so I'm like, where's the disconnect here? Like, yes, obviously we should all, whatever economic bucket we're in, we should all be able to spend our money in the way that makes us happy. Absolutely. That's the American dream.
it's a
But
great question.
but yeah, where's the disconnect? At what point does this become just the way of the pet industry to where we're pricing average people out of the ability to simply feed their pet, right?
Where's the Taco Bell option?
Even Taco Bell's not that inexpensive anymore.
I know. We'll have some words of Taco Bell. But, like, I want to ask you, too, like, I know you hate the word humanization. What would you call it? Because, I mean, is it really humanization?
It is exactly what I would call it. I just hate the term, right? Our pets, again, I use the term basically, you know, lifestyle scaling, lifestyle compatibility. Our pets are going to mirror whatever our lifestyle is. It's just how it works. You can call it humanization, but it's just really, my pet's lifestyle and my lifestyle are going to echo each other because I'm honestly the one spending the money and I'm honestly the one making the decisions. My pet may have a moral a moral problem with the $250,000 collar, but he's not making that decision. Um, so Jordan, back to your point, I prefer the term priced out to demonized when we're talking about this. I mean, I think I think it's true, but I think it's very, very unfortunate. Businesses in general, unless you are, and again, I'm going to use the word demonize here. I don't mean to demonize any business, but unless you're a flat out charity, you follow the money, right? And I want to be able to make money. A fundamental rule of business, the rule of business is a company exists to make money. If I can't do that, I'm not going to be a business. And so obviously I'm going to go to where that spend is. Your point though is very valid. And it's something I've argued for years. Somebody making $50,000 a year, with a family of four in a downtown basement apartment struggling to make ends meet, they have the potential of loving their dog just as much as that person with the $100 million car collection. They just don't have the same wherewithal. Now, unfortunately, I can sell one dog collar to that guy. You know, how many cans of 50-cent dog food do I have to sell to the rest of the market to mirror my profit, to equal my profit on that one SKU? So again, I don't like the word demonize, and I'm not trying to demonize, but marketing in general, the arc of the marketing universe, bends towards, you know, more spend. It just does. And right now, I don't know if it's Stephanie, you can answer the question better than I can as an actual formulator. It seems not completely possible to make a high quality, high meat, high nutrient, perfectly safe, food product that is extremely low priced, as it is to make one that's not low priced. I mean, is that kind of fair to say? What you put into it is kind of what you get out of it?
Mm, I think you can make something perfectly safe, perfectly nutritious, perfectly acceptable, and great, and you don't have to break the budget. Because at the end of the day, an amino acid is an amino acid. A protein is a protein. And if it's highly digestible, it's highly digestible. I think where we start having issues with as formulators or nutritionists is you have these what we call constraints, right? So now we have to have high meat, high quality. First off, what does even high quality mean?
Very subjective
Yeah,
term.
like, I mean, if you start talking high digestibility, well, an egg is highly digestible. Does that mean it's high quality? Because most people will be like, "No, I don't want an egg in my product," or "I don't want chicken." Um, but I think we start adding constraints, human grade, non-GMO, organic, or like, we start adding these adjectives to nutrition, and we price it out, or we make it very expensive, where then all of a sudden we start talking about, "Well, now I need an economically appropriate auction, or I need a medium or a mildly premium or a middle of the road." It's like you're talking all the same nutrients at the end of the day.
So I want to ask you something here because that's very, very interesting. I don't disagree with your marketing term stance, but let's go back to that really, really high quality example you used that is affordable, and I forgot exactly what you called it, but let's go back to that. You know, a super high quality food at the bottom shelf price. It would seem to me if we could actually do that, it would seem to me that that would be a market disruptor. Nobody wants to pay more for anything than they have to. Even the person buying that $250,000 diamond collar, if they could get it for 10,000, you know they would, right? Value is still value. Why are we not doing that then?
So I'm gonna answer your question with a question, and it was something we had talked about earlier.
My favorite kind of
I
answer.
know. We use the word cheap, right? So, like, whether or not we're cost optimizing, it all comes down to cheap or economically savvy or economically affordable. But when we start using those words, we as humans instantly start thinking we've cut corners. It's low value. It must not be as good. Like, you can pay $5 for a candy bar or you can pay $1 for a candy bar. Does that mean that candy bar is less of a candy bar?
Okay.
But to some people, if we buy this for $1, it feels less than because it's cheap. And I'm using air quotes, everyone who can't see me and with my hands.
But I think in a sense that bubbles back around to our
Yeah,
bubbles,
yeah.
right? Just what I plan on spending here and what I think is commensurate to my income. If I spend beneath that, this can't be good. There is a there is a value structure in people's minds. Here's an example, and again, I don't know how to sort this out. I don't know the answer to it, but let's say you could buy a BMW, and that BMW you could buy for $15,000. You would have a whole lot of people that have never bought a BMW before because I already know in my mind, aspirationally, I wanna buy a BMW. It's just it is not a reality for me, right? You already have a lot of people with that mindset. Once it hits $15,000, you're gonna have a whole lot of people buying that car. You're gonna have other people that were buying BMWs fall out of that market because I don't want the riffraff, who can afford, but you know what I mean, they can buy a $15,000 car driving the same kind of car I can because part of why I drive this car, part of why I own my house, part of why I eat what I eat, part of what I feed my dog what I feed, is self-expressive. It's a self-expressive benefit. There are several different benefits, the reason we buy things. One of them is what does it say about me? You know? And so you're gonna lose a lot of people from that market, and then you're gonna have a lot of people that just aren't sure if it's now $15,000, it just can't be that good. And I think we run into that a lot in the pet food world, you know? This costs more, it has to be better. And we've talked about the fact that, you know, the average American doesn't spend that much time studying pet food. And so a really good gauge of value and a really good gauge of quality is how much does it cost? And to your point, Stephanie, what are the words I've heard, that are very, very aspirational words to me? Human grade, freeze dried. These are all aspirational terms that as soon as I can get a dog food that has these kind of terms, I already know I want to buy it, just like I already know I want to buy that BMW because these are things that I've locked in as this is the next level of me. This is the next level of my dog. But to your point, I don't know why we haven't managed to convince people, and you and I have had this conversation a lot, you know, why we can't convince people that this dog food is perfectly fine and would still enable a lot of consumers to eat themselves.
I mean, if you wanna compare a human grade piece of meat and a non-human grade piece of meat, let's just assume the only difference is that it's not human grade. Digestibility can be the same, the risk of microbes can still be the same.
Oh, people get sick off expensive food all the
Yeah,
time.
we get sick in fancy restaurants too, just it only takes one thing, and so does that label truly make it that much better? Maybe not.
But going again back to that, price shock, just because we have price shock, somebody else might not.
Mhm.
Else might have price shock in the opposite direction. You're feeding your dog a dog food that only costs $20 a pound? Don't you love it?
Yeah. Don't you think that's where we're going right now with, like sorry, real fast, kinda spicy. Fresh versus kibble, right? We're seeing this uptick in fresh, and now all of a sudden, you feed your dog kibble? Do you even love it?
Fresh has the cachet of if as human beings, and I don't remember the last time I didn't eat something that was processed. So I'm gonna throw that right out there, okay? If it doesn't somehow start with processed, I don't even know how to find it. I think there's a human connotation out there that if we're cooking fresh, that's just better. If we're cooking fresh, that's more love for our family or our children or anything like that. It just has that bias built in. It really does. I mean, think about your own experience. You know, whenever you go to somebody's house and they baked a cake, are they delighted to tell you it came from a box? Because they will always tell you it was scratch baked, right? It's just where they go. And so I think from a marketing perspective, and I'm not saying it's not better for you or the dog, I am not one to evaluate that statement, but I can evaluate that these are inherent human values that we hear that and, "Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah." That means love. Making my kid a fresh grilled cheese sandwich sounds better than opening a can of soup and putting it on the stove.
But do you think that that's a public response? Like, I would never feed my kid fast food. But sometimes when we're running late after soccer practice, we may swing by and get fast food. And it's like the things that we do, and I'm kind of playing devil's advocate here.
I think it's the perfect statement. It absolutely brings it back to humanization, and that's how we are as humans. There are humans that if they again, I'll use myself as, as the example here. There are humans if I sat down and told them what I eat,
Me too.
they would be so repelled, right? I would just be anathema. I'm abhorrent. I'm just abhorrent. How can you eat like that? There are people that live their lives that way. Right? And this is no different when I'm buying a pet product. There are certain things we do, there are certain things we don't do. You know, my kids, and I would like to say I didn't learn until my kids were grown that we shouldn't give them soda, but that's not true, and I wouldn't have cared anyway. My kids grew up enjoying soda. That has gotten me so many stern looks in parent circles. I know kids that cannot have juice. Water is what they have to drink because water is the only pure, so we are like that as humans. And of course, we're like that as our pets. I think you perfectly put that back together on the humanization front.
And it also kind of like brings us back to like how much of this is really for the pet and how much of it is for the pet owner. And I would kind of argue that it kind of starts and ends with the pet owner, right? Because the pet, like, they can't give you feedback. They can't tell you if they like something or not, except, refusing to play with that toy or refusing to eat this new food. But, like, we're the ones making all the decisions, and we are the ones that are reflected through those decisions. So, like, probably a lot of this humanization is driven by, like, what we would like to reflect out as humans. It's really not about pets at all.
You're right. I don't want to destroy my pet by feeding it the wrong thing. And so we did some research. This is a number of years ago, but the industry still thinks, we feed our pet and we spend we spend what we can on our pet or blah, 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 blah because of love. And we absolutely do love our pet, but it isn't love, it's guilt, right? There's a certain value equation at which my guilt dissipates. I no longer feel guilty at a certain price point. It's just how it works. right? Now, if for some reason I know I can spend more and I'm buying a lesser quality food, I'm not going to feed that to my kids and I'm not going to feed that to my pet because I feel bad about that. If, however, it is straining my purse strings, you know, that level of quality might just be fine for what my pet has to eat. We have been well trained, again, Stephanie, to your point, on what the key things are, what the key terms are, what I should be doing. As a human being, in pet spending and in human spending, I'm well aware of what I can and cannot afford. But I'll try to get to the level, again, where my guilt goes away, and then I'm happy there. But that's, to your point, Jordan, it is completely human.
It's interesting though, and I promise I will land this plane real fast. And maybe this is just talking to all the moms out there, because you mentioned guilt. And I was talking to my mom about this huge shift in feeding babies, right? Way back when I was a baby, formula was totally fine. Like, to have people actually breastfeed their kids was like few and far between. We had other things to do in life. And now there's this huge shift where, like, shame on you, you can't provide for your baby. And like, moms and society is guilting other moms if they can't do something because their body just can't produce it. And it's like, well, you're missing out on X, Y, and Z, or there's, all these things that milk provides that formula doesn't. And at the end of the day, like, aren't we just glad the baby is being fed and taken care of and loved? But then also, I mean, even in baby formula, there's still a wide range of like super premium, like, holy cow, you're putting everything and then some into this formula, like cost-wise, to, white label store, grocery store brand. And it's like, great successful people are all over the board. They've been formula fed, they've been breastfed, they've been fancy formula fed, they've been soy formula. Like, I wonder if we took that approach to our pets though. Not that our pets are going to become leaders. Maybe they will. Maybe we'll have some help for us and if our pets lead. But it's the same thing. It's that new guilt of like, oh, like when I told people like what I fed my daughters, like instant guilt, because the judgment was like, you could cut it with a knife. It was so sick.
That is also, I'm not going to call that humanization. I'm going to call that human, right? But we're that way in general. And again, I'm not trying to denigrate anybody. If you think about your own life, you know your own life, you know where you're right? Some people are comfortable taking that a step further and telling other people where they know they're right. Not everybody does that. And this is probably a top but I think it's a great point. I think this is a topic for another episode, but I think one of the things that has really exacerbated this over the last handful of years is social media. You know, I may not have known how other people were feeding their pets. I may not have known what other people were doing with their pets, but now they're putting it out there. And if I'm somebody who really feels like I have this dialed in and you don't, the anonymity, for lack of a better word, of social media has made me completely comfortable in telling you all the places you are failing your pet. And that's, you know, that not only drives aspirational values because now I look at somebody that has that $250,000 collar, but it also gives me the ability, Steph, to your point, to gloat over somebody that's only feeding this product. How dare you, right? That poor dog never did anything to you, and that's how you're feeding it. So I think that's another episode.
How dare you give them this crunchy treat?
Yeah. How dare you give them the basic, essentials they need to live,
And you let them in your
just at
house?
a
Come
different.
on now.
Exactly. But you've seen it. Again, it is being human. So did we answer the question? I mean, I think there is a very valid case to be made for luxury. I agree with you guys, at least where we were starting to go. Even myself, it's hard to do without some kind of moral judgment
Yeah.
because it is just so far out of my own experience base. How could you blow that on this? Aren't people starving? I mean, I think one of you said that, right? But again, I don't know that again they're not curing they're not ending hunger in some other country. I just happen to have $250 or 250 grand kicking around in my pocket and I saw this collar and I thought, Yeah, let's give the dog a
Why
treat.
not?
Yeah, I think, as much as we could judge and as much as this could be, a litmus test or, you know, we shouldn't be doing this for our pets. It really is to each their own. And I think the whole point of this really is to kind of highlight where we've gone as an industry, right? We went from kibble being the thing that everybody fed all the time. Well, really, we went from table scraps to kibble. And now we're kind of entering this movement where, everything's supposed to be better for pets, but with better comes a heftier price tag. And at
Because
the
it can.
because it
To
can,
Stephanie's point, it does sounds like it doesn't have to, but it
yeah.
can.
Yeah, and I think that's what, like, the industry has learned this, right? Like, the people that are playing in this industry are really savvy, and they understand they can make a significant profit on what they're selling just by kicking the price up a little bit and, like, expanding that margin. I think that the reason why we wanted to talk about it mainly is, sure, whatever, if you wanna buy a $250,000 dog collar for your dog, do that, who am I to judge? What I'm worried about is when this becomes, like, less of the exception, and the pet industry continues to trend upward while income inequality continues to widen and while the, like, economic confidence continues to fall. It's just, like, seems to be a perfect storm of all these factors converging, and it seems like the people that have been able to afford, these luxury products, they're gonna be fine. But what about the people that are relying on, the Great Value Kibble brand?
Again, the 3 of us have discussed the point that, there was a recent PNC Bank study that said 67% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. That's a big number, and we've also talked about the recent Moody's study that said the top 10% are doing 50% of spending right now. You know, I don't know where this nets out.
Well, and I think it's important to, like, circle up for pet owners that format of pet food, right? Kibble, canned, air dried, freeze dried, fresh, whatever you wanna call it. But I think we have to be careful with demonizing one or maybe, canceling kibble or canceling like, it's great that we're doing research on this stuff. It's great that better options are coming or potentially better options or maybe just a different value sense or marketing to a different pet owner. But at the same time, and what Jordan's getting at too is like we do have to be very careful because if we keep bashing kibble, what is going to happen to that population that is surviving and thriving and relying on kibble? And it could be whatever format, right? I'm just calling kibble.
It's a really good question. I think from both of you. I mean, I'm not saying this is a logical extrapolation of where that goes, and again, I don't like the word demonize, but if we continue to marginalize, kibble, what has fueled the growth in our industry is people keep owning pets. The majority of pet owners can't keep buying, they can't keep going up the ladder. They just can't. The people we've talked about, they can continue to do that. But unless they start owning millions of dogs, there's that part of the market, is and I'm not gonna say it's at risk, but it's certainly an area that we would look at for, a little bit of nervousness. What happened if somewhere along the lines people started to become less and less likely to own a pet due to the fact that they just can't feel, due to marketing, that they could do the right thing for that animal? Again, I'm not saying that's a logical conclusion to this, but it's something to throw out there. There have to be people out there that said, "I just can't afford to own a pet in the right way."
To say that that would never happen, I think is we would have to stick our head in the sand because that's what's happening with kids, right? Like, we either don't like the political landscape or we can't afford daycare because Lord knows, like I mean, and that's a justification, like, when people are like, "Oh, are you gonna have a third?" I go, "If I told you what I paid in daycare, there's n I mean, economically, I cannot afford a third child." But, I mean, yeah, we're gonna get to that point with pets, it's just a matter of time. Now whether it happens in the next 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, but yeah, I mean, if we keep isolating things because we think they're bad or because more expensive is better,
I have that date down as next June, but, we'll see if that's right.
Jordan, any bets? Just kidding.
In this economy, I am betting.
Well, there you have it. We went from $250,000 dog collars to the question that really matters. Where's the line between loving your pet and pricing everyone else out of the game?
So if you want to drop $250,000 on a diamond-studded collar for your dog, and honestly, we kind of hope that you do so that you come back and tell us what that experience was like, hey, that's your thing. Own it. The point is, we all live in our own economic bubbles, and each one has its own limitations for what's expensive and what's cheap. But here's what we kept coming back to. The pet industry has figured this out. They know they can charge more, and you can bet your bottom dollar that trend will continue.
The humanization of pets is real. Our dogs have become our kids, our family members, our emotional anchors. And yeah, that means we're going to spend money on them, but we have to ask ourselves, what happens when better automatically becomes more expensive? What happens to people feeding their dog great value brands because that's what they can afford? Are we pricing them out? Are we making them feel guilty? And are we eventually going to shame people out of pet ownership altogether?
Michael's perspective is a sticking point. We all make decisions driven by guilt, not necessarily always by what's best for our animals. And Dr. Steph reminded us that nutrients are nutrients, regardless of the price tag or how fancy the label looks. There's a lot of room between the bargain aisle and the luxury boutique for perfectly healthy, perfectly nutritious pet food that doesn't require a second mortgage.
But the real takeaway, we have a responsibility as an industry and as pet owners to keep options open for everyone. Because honestly, a dog doesn't care if its collar costs $5 or $250,000. Really, does it even care that it's wearing a collar? It just wants to be loved.
So we want to hear from you. Where do you fall in all of this? Are you team luxury pet brand or team great value? Do you feel pressured by what you see on social media about how you quote unquote should be feeding your pet? And have you ever decided not to get a pet because you were worried you couldn't afford to do it right?
You know what to do. Give us a follow on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube and let us know what you think. And you better believe it, we read every single message. And this conversation is far from over. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Barking Mad. If you want to learn more about BSM Partners, please visit us at bsmpartners.net. Don't forget to subscribe on your favorite leading podcast platform or share it with a friend to stay current on the latest pet industry trends and conversations.
We'd also like to thank our dedicated team, Adamiette Thomas, Neely Bowden, Kate Wright, Katie Wolf, and Dr. Katie Miller. A special shout out to Leanne Haggerty and Michael Johnson in support of this episode, and to David Perez for our original music in the intro and outro. See you next time.